Like Dr. Chen said, I'm Max Schermer,
I'm Joshua Park.
and we're presenting on the prevalence of environmental versus clinical non-tuberculous mycobacteria at varying water heater temperatures.
So before we start, we would like to make another thank you to Mr. K for sponsoring our project and giving us the financial resources to conduct our research.
So let's start by defining what are NTMs. So NTMs are naturally occurring species of bacteria, and there's over 150 different species found throughout the environment. And while most are not harmful to humans, some are known to cause infections, and those are called clinical NTMs, and the ones that don't are called environmental NTMs. And these can lead to chronic lung infections and diseases, and especially in elderly women. And they can also be subdivided into two categories. So one is slow growing and the other is fast. And the slow growing grow around from like 7 to 9 days, and the faster growing ones take 12 to 21 days to grow.
So the clinical NTMs pose a serious health risk to many elderly people especially. This is because the clinical NTMs cause infections inside the respiratory tracts, which can lead to inflammation and later can lead to bad coughs and possibly fatigue. So currently in America, there are 70,000 patients that are diagnosed with NTM infections, and Hawaii is home to the largest amount of these NTM infections, which makes us want to study it even more.
So where are NTMs found? So they're usually found in areas that develop a biofilm, and that's like a thin, slimy surface where that water often covers. And sinks, shower heads, air conditioners, and faucets are just some of the places that NTMs can be found. They prefer areas intermittently exposed to water, and Hawaii's high humidity causes both clinical and environmental NTMs to be found more here than on the mainland. Because on the mainland, the colder winters get the NTMs off of these areas, and they kind of regrow during the warmer summer months. But here, they're prevalent year-round.
So with our research, we intended to answer the research question about what specific temperatures do clinical NTMs prefer, and is there a difference in the environment between the ones that clinical NTMs prefer and the ones that environmental NTMs prefer? So we hypothesized that due to the higher temperatures, there would be a lower ratio of clinical NTMs to environmental NTMs, and our null hypothesis stated that there is no effect between water heater temperatures and the amount of clinical NTMs.
So our experiment began with swabbing almost 40 shower heads across the island, and we used Puritan sterile double-headed collection swabs for that. And then back in the lab, we would disinfect them with CPC or cetylpyridium chloride, and then plate them on 7H10OADC agar plates. And next, to get the DNA out, we'd use a silica bead beater and plant DNA extraction kit. And following that, we'd amplify the DNA using PCR with RPOB primers, and then running a gel electrophoresis to test the quality of the samples.
So after running the gel electrophoresis and looking at the quality of the samples, we selected the samples that had well-amplified DNA and sent them off to be sequenced through a series of sequencing reactions. And after we got back these sequences, we used a program called Nucleotide Blast in order to plug these sequences in and to find which species were inside these agar plates.
So prior to our research, Dr. Jennifer Honda and her team had asked the research question of where are NTMs found versus where they're not found. So that's not really differentiating between clinical and environmental species. And in her study, 40 of the 49 samples collected were NTM positive, but in ours, only 12 of our 37 were positive.
So there was also another research project on the mainland that concerned water heater temperatures. However, in the NTM positive section, they didn't really differentiate between those that were environmental and those were clinical, and only the clinical ones cause pulmonary infections. So we wanted to bridge this gap by looking specifically at clinical NTMs.
So here we have our positive plates that we took pictures of on days 1, 4, 14, and 21. And we can see that most of our NTMs were slow growing, as a lot of the bacterial growth didn't start happening until day 14 and 21.
So this diagram depicts where we got our samples from, and as you can see, it's mostly concentrated in the Honolulu area because we mostly used classmates to get these samples. And the red triangles show where NTM were negative, or there were no NTMs located in the shower heads. And the yellow triangles show where there were NTM positive, or clinical NTMs were located in the shower heads.
So in our findings, much like the mainland study of the water heater versus NTM prevalence, we did have less NTMs at the higher water heater temperature than the lower water heater temperatures. But unfortunately, we didn't find any environmental NTMs and only clinical NTMs.
So of the NTM positive plates that we had, we compared the water heater temperatures to the actual species that existed inside those plates. And as you can see here, most of them are Mycobacterium porcinum, which mainly infects swine, but 2 of them were Mycobacterium chimera, which can pose a serious threat to human health.
So because of our results, we had to accept our null hypothesis, and we officially tested this using a chi-squared test. And since our result was under 0.2, it means that our results were not statistically significant. And we think this is because we had a low sample size, and that contributed to not having very many NTMs.
So our advice for next year's K-Fellows are to stay on schedule and be punctual. And in order to do this, you probably want to choose a topic that genuinely interests you, or else you'll just feel like it's another chore. And you also have to stay organized during your project, so keep track of all your methods and results, and make efforts to keep the deadlines.
Oh, sorry. I also forgot to add that. Oh, my bad. But even though we had to accept the null hypothesis, we still think that it's a good idea to turn up your water heater temperature, especially if you have elderly Asian ladies in your household, because they're particularly susceptible to NTM infection. And our acknowledgements, we wanted to thank Mr. K once again for his generous donation, and our mentor, Dr. Honda, exposed us to the fields of NTMs, and she also gave us these little NTM plushies as well. And finally, Dr. Chan for helping us to learn lab techniques and supporting us throughout our experience. That's bibliography, and thanks for watching.